Imagine two men standing at the same crossroads of life. Both are intelligent. Both work hard. Both raise families and pay their bills and worry, late at night, about money. But one of them dies with piles of unpaid debt, and the other leaves behind an estate that funds charities and family and causes for generations. What separates them is not luck, and it is not even income. It is something quieter and far more powerful. It is the way they think about money itself. This is the story that sits at the heart of Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, one of the best-selling personal finance books ever written, a book that has sold tens of millions of copies and has been translated into dozens of languages, and a book that continues to provoke arguments decades after it first appeared. Some readers call it the book that woke them up. Others call it oversimplified, even reckless. What almost nobody does is ignore it. Today we are going to walk through what this book actually says, why it struck such a nerve, where its wisdom holds up, and where you should keep your guard raised. Because whether you end up agreeing with Kiyosaki or arguing with him, the questions he forces you to ask about your own relationship with money are questions worth sitting with. Robert Kiyosaki published Rich Dad, Poor Dad in 1997, and it grew out of his own life story, or at least the version of it he chose to tell. Kiyosaki grew up in Hawaii, the son of an educated and respected man. That man, whom he calls his poor dad in the book, was highly credentialed, held an advanced degree, and rose to become the head of education for the state of Hawaii. By every conventional measure, this was a successful person. And yet, Kiyosaki tells us, his father struggled financially his whole life and died with very little to show for it. Standing alongside this figure is a second man, the father of Kiyosaki's childhood best friend. This man, whom Kiyosaki calls his rich dad, never finished the 8th grade. He had almost no formal education. But he had a restless entrepreneurial mind. He built businesses, he accumulated real estate and enterprises across Hawaii, and he became one of the wealthiest men Kiyosaki knew. The book is framed as the lessons the young Robert absorbed from these two very different mentors, one preaching the path of the good student and the loyal employee, the other preaching the path of the investor and the business owner. Now, it is worth pausing here, because context matters. Over the years, many people have questioned whether Rich Dad was a real person at all, or whether he was a composite, or a teaching device, a kind of parable dressed up as memoir. Kiyosaki himself has, at various points, given answers that lean toward the metaphorical. So the honest way to read this book is not as a strict biography and not as an investment manual, but as a kind of philosophical fable about money. The two dads are less two literal men and more two competing voices that live inside most of us. One voice says, get good grades, find a safe job, work hard, save, and everything will be fine. The other voice says, that path leads to a lifetime of working for other people and for the tax authorities, and if you want to be free, you have to learn a completely different game. Understanding that this is a book about mindset first and mechanics only second is the key to reading it well. When you evaluate its specific financial advice, you should be skeptical and careful. When you engage with its psychology and its questions, you may find it genuinely transforming. The timing also mattered enormously. The book arrived just as the old social contract, the one where you joined a company, stayed loyal for 40 years, and retired on a comfortable pension, was visibly crumbling. Pensions were disappearing. Individuals were suddenly expected to manage their own retirement accounts and make their own investment decisions, often with no education whatsoever in how money actually works. Into that anxiety and confusion, Kiyosaki dropped a book that said, in effect, the rules have changed, your parents' advice may now be dangerous, and nobody is going to teach you this, so you had better teach yourself. That message landed hard, and it explains a great deal of the book's staying power. If you strip the book down to a single sentence, it would be this. The poor and the middle class work for money, but the rich make money work for them. This sounds like a slogan, and it is, but underneath the slogan is a genuinely useful reframe. Most of us are taught to think about earning in terms of a wage or a salary. You trade your hours for dollars. You get a raise, you trade the same hours for slightly more dollars. Your entire financial life becomes a function of how much time you can sell and at what rate. Kiyosaki argues that this model, however respectable, is a trap because it makes your income entirely dependent on your continued physical labor, and it puts a ceiling on what you can earn that is roughly equal to the number of hours in a week. The alternative he proposes is to spend your energy acquiring things that generate income without your ongoing labor. He tells a story from his own childhood, in which rich dad hires the young Robert and his friend for pennies an hour, deliberately underpays them, and lets them stew in frustration and resentment. Then, when they finally come to him angry and demanding fair pay, he uses that emotional moment to teach a lesson. The point of the low wages was to make them feel, in their bones, the powerlessness of the person who works only for a paycheck. The lesson was, if you let fear and desire drive you from one paycheck to the next, you will stay on that treadmill forever. The way out is to stop reacting emotionally to money and start thinking about it strategically. This is where he introduces one of his most memorable phrases, the rat race, the endless cycle in which you earn more, spend more, take on more obligations, and run faster and faster just to stay in the same place. The goal of the whole book is to show you how to step off that wheel. Here we arrive at what is arguably the single most valuable idea in the entire book, and it is deceptively simple. Kiyosaki insists that the reason most people struggle financially is not that they do not earn enough. It is that they are financially illiterate. They have never been taught to read the language of money, and so they make decisions based on feeling and appearance rather than on understanding. And the very first word in that language, the word everyone gets wrong, is the word asset. Kiyosaki offers a definition so blunt that accountants sometimes wince at it, but that ordinary people find clarifying. An asset, he says, is something that puts money into your pocket. A liability is something that takes money out of your pocket. That is the whole test. Not what something is called, not what it is worth on paper, but which direction the cash flows. Does this thing feed you, or does it eat you? Once you adopt this lens, you start looking at your own life very differently. The expensive car in the driveway is not an asset because it costs you money every single month in payments, insurance, fuel, and depreciation. It eats. The designer wardrobe, the boat, the gadgets, all of it eats. And then he drops the claim that made this book famous and infamous in equal measure. Your house, he argues, is not an asset. For most middle-class families, the home is their single largest purchase and the centerpiece of their financial identity. They think of it as their biggest asset. But Kiyosaki points out that for as long as you live in it, that house takes money out of your pocket every month, through the mortgage, the property taxes, the insurance, the maintenance, the repairs. It does not generate income. It generates bills. Now, this is where you need to think critically, because this claim is genuinely contested. A home can build equity, it can appreciate, and it can be a forced savings mechanism that many people would never manage on their own. Financial professionals rightly note that a primary residence has real value even if it does not produce monthly cash flow. So the honest reading is this. Kiyosaki is overstating for effect, but the underlying warning is sound. Do not let a lifestyle purchase masquerade in your mind as a wealth-building machine. Do not buy the biggest house you can possibly afford and then tell yourself you are investing, when what you are really doing is chaining yourself to a very large monthly liability. The constructive side of this idea is what he calls building your asset column. Real assets, in his framework, are things like businesses that run without your daily presence, stocks and bonds, income-producing real estate, royalties from intellectual property, and anything else that puts money in your pocket while you sleep. His prescription is straightforward to say and hard to do. Focus your energy month after month, year after year, on acquiring genuine, income-producing assets and let the income from those assets grow until, eventually, it covers your expenses. The moment your assets pay for your lifestyle, you are financially free because you no longer have to work for money. Money is now working for you. That is the finish line the entire book is pointing toward. Flowing directly out of the asset idea is a chapter with a wonderfully double-edged title, Mind Your Own Business. Kiyosaki draws a sharp distinction between your profession and your business. Your profession is what you do for a paycheck. You might be a chef, a nurse, a mechanic, a software engineer. Your business, on the other hand, is what you build for yourself, your asset column. And his complaint about the way most people live is that they spend their entire lives minding someone else's business. They work to make their employer rich, they work to make the bank rich through the interest on their loans, and they work to make the government rich through their taxes, and at the end of the month, whatever is left over, they spend. They never, in a serious and sustained way, mind their own business. He is careful here to say he is not necessarily telling you to quit your job. Your profession can pay the bills and provide stability while you quietly build. The point is a shift in attention and priority. Alongside earning your salary, you should be systematically buying and building real assets, even in small amounts, even slowly. Keep your day job, but stop letting your entire financial life be defined by it. Keep your expenses low, avoid the trap of lifestyle inflation where every raise instantly becomes a new payment, and funnel the difference into things that grow. It is a patient, almost boring strategy underneath all the provocative language, and that is precisely why it works for the people who actually follow it. One of the more eye-opening sections of the book deals with corporations and taxes, and it is here that Kiyosaki reveals what he sees as one of the great hidden advantages of the financially educated. He tells a version of the history of income tax, arguing that it was originally sold to the public as a way to tax only the very rich, but that over time it settled most heavily onto the middle class and the working poor, the very people it was supposedly meant to protect. The reason, he argues, is that the truly wealthy learn to play by a different set of rules, and the central tool in that different game is the corporation. Here is the contrast he draws, and it is striking when you first see it. An employee earns money, then pays taxes on that money, and then spends whatever is left. Earn, get taxed, spend. But a business owner operating through a corporation can, within the bounds of the law, earn money, spend on legitimate business expenses first, and then pay taxes only on what remains. Earn, spend, get taxed. The order is reversed, and that reversal, repeated over a lifetime, adds up to an enormous difference. He argues that the rich understand the interplay of the four great disciplines: accounting, investing, understanding markets, and understanding the law, and they use that knowledge to structure their affairs efficiently and legally. The person who knows the rules of the game plays it very differently from the person who does not even know a game is being played. Now, once again, a note of caution from a careful reader. Kiyosaki paints in very broad strokes here, and the specifics of tax law are complicated. They vary from country to country, and they change over time. This section should not be taken as a how-to guide. But the deeper insight is durable and important. Financial literacy is not just about knowing how to save. It is about understanding the structures and the rules that govern how money moves, because those structures quietly reward the people who understand them and quietly penalize the people who do not. The takeaway is not to go set up a shell company tomorrow. The takeaway is to become curious, to learn the rules of the environment you are operating in, and to stop assuming that the default path everyone around you is walking is the only path or the smartest one. Two more of the book's core ideas deserve our attention, and they are about you rather than about accounting. The first is the notion that financial intelligence lets you, in Kiyosaki's words, invent money. He does not mean this literally, of course. He means that the financially educated person sees opportunities that others walk right past. Where an untrained eye sees a rundown property, a trained eye sees a deal. Where most people see a falling market and panic, the prepared investor sees discounted assets and moves in. He argues that the single greatest asset any of us has is not any stock or property, it is our own mind. A trained mind can generate wealth out of situations that look like nothing to everyone else. And the corollary is sobering. If your mind is untrained, no amount of money will save you, which is why, he observes, so many lottery winners and sudden windfall recipients end up broke again within a few years. They received money, but they never developed the financial intelligence to keep it or grow it. Money flows to the person who is prepared to receive it, and it flows away from the person who is not. The second idea is captured in a phrase, work to learn, do not work to earn. This is his advice especially to the young and the ambitious. He argues that people cripple their own futures by chasing the highest salary they can find at every step and by becoming so specialized, so narrowly skilled, that they are trapped in one lane. Instead, he urges people to take jobs, sometimes even lower-paying jobs, specifically for the skills those jobs will teach them. Learn how sales works, because everything in business is ultimately sales. Learn how to communicate, how to lead a team, how marketing functions, how systems are built. He himself, he says, once took a job in sales precisely because he was terrified of rejection and knew he needed to conquer that fear. The wisdom here is broadly applicable and surprisingly humane. Think of your early career, and honestly your entire career, as an education you are being paid to receive, and choose your moves based on what they will teach you and who they will connect you with, not merely on what they will pay you this year. Perhaps the most psychologically astute part of the whole book is where Kiyosaki turns the lens inward and asks, why, if these ideas are so clear, do so few people ever act on them? His answer is that the obstacles are not out in the world. They are inside us. And he names 5 of them. The first is fear, specifically the fear of losing money. Everybody feels it. The difference between the rich and everyone else, he argues, is not that the rich do not feel fear, but that they do not let fear paralyze them. They have made peace with the reality that losing is part of winning, that every serious investor takes losses, and that the goal is not to avoid all loss, but to learn, recover, and keep moving. The person ruled by fear keeps all their money in the safest possible place and, in doing so, guarantees they will never build real wealth. The second obstacle is cynicism, the endless chorus of doubts and what-ifs, both the ones in our own heads and the ones supplied by the people around us. He points out that cynics never win because they talk themselves out of every opportunity before they even examine it. Chicken Little runs around shouting that the sky is falling, and the noise drowns out the chance to actually look up and assess the situation clearly. The third obstacle is laziness, but he defines it in an unusual and clever way. The busiest people, he says, are often the laziest because they use their busyness as an excuse to avoid dealing with the things that actually matter. The person who buries themselves in work to avoid thinking about their health, their family, or their finances is, in his framing, being lazy in the deepest sense. The cure he offers is a little bit of healthy greed, a willingness to ask, how can I afford this, instead of flatly declaring, I cannot afford it. That question forces the mind to work and to seek solutions, whereas the flat declaration shuts the mind down. The fourth obstacle is bad habits, and here his message is that our financial lives are simply the sum of our daily habits. His signature habit, borrowed from an old classic of the genre, is to pay yourself first. Before you pay the landlord, before you pay the credit card, before you pay anyone else, set aside money into your own asset column. It sounds almost irresponsible when you first hear it, and he acknowledges that it creates pressure, but he argues that the pressure is the point. It forces you to find a way to meet your other obligations while still building your future, rather than building your future only with the scraps that happen to be left over, which for most people is nothing at all. The fifth and final obstacle is arrogance, which he defines as ego plus ignorance. When we do not know something and are too proud to admit it, we make expensive mistakes and then defend them. The antidote is humility and a lifelong commitment to learning, a willingness to seek out those who know more than we do and to actually listen to them. Toward the end of the book, Kiyosaki offers a set of practical prompts for people who feel the ideas resonating, but do not know where to begin. He talks about the importance of having a reason greater than reality, a deep emotional why that pulls you forward when things get hard, because willpower alone tends to fade. He talks about choosing daily, understanding that every dollar you hold is a choice between buying a liability that makes you poorer or investing in your own education and your asset column. He emphasizes the value of surrounding yourself with people who are smarter than you and who understand money, and of paying good advisors well, because a good advisor who saves or earns you far more than their fee is not an expense. They are one of your best investments. He also champions the idea of taking action and learning by doing, of starting small, of treating early efforts as tuition rather than as final verdicts on your ability. He encourages people to look for models, to find someone who has done what you want to do and to study how they did it. And he repeatedly returns to the theme of generosity, arguing that the more you give, whether it is money or knowledge or time, the more tends to come back to you, and that a scarcity mindset, one that clutches tightly and gives nothing, tends to produce exactly the scarcity it fears. Underneath all the specific tips is a single relentless message. Knowledge without action is worthless. The book will do nothing for you if you close it and change nothing. Its entire value is unlocked only when you take the next small step. Because I want to be a fair guide and not just a cheerleader, let me be honest with you about the criticisms, because they are real and they matter. First, this book is long on mindset and remarkably short on specifics. It will fire you up and make you want to invest, but it will not actually teach you how to analyze a rental property or read a financial statement or evaluate a stock. It is a book of philosophy, not a book of method, and if you mistake the inspiration for actual competence, you can get hurt. Second, some of Kiyosaki's real-world ventures and later products have drawn heavy criticism, and some of his more aggressive advice around debt and leverage can be genuinely dangerous for an inexperienced person who takes it literally. Debt used skillfully by an expert is a tool, but debt used carelessly by a beginner is a trap, and the book does not always draw that line clearly enough. Third, the two dads narrative is almost certainly more parable than fact, so do not treat it as a documented case study. And fourth, the world is full of people who succeeded through exactly the steady, educated, salaried, save and invest path that the poor dad represents, so do not let the book convince you that a good job and a diversified retirement account are somehow foolish. They are not. For many people, they are wise and sufficient. The right way to hold this book, then, is as a starting point and a provocation, not as a final authority. Let it shake you awake. Then go get the specific, detailed, sometimes boring education that the book itself does not provide. So let us gather the threads. If you remember nothing else from this book, remember these ideas. First, financial literacy is a skill you can learn, and it is different from being smart or being educated in the traditional sense. Learn to read the language of money. Second, understand the difference between an asset and a liability in the simplest possible terms. An asset puts money in your pocket, a liability takes it out, and your job is to spend your life patiently filling your asset column. Third, be honest about the difference between looking rich and being rich. Looking rich means buying liabilities that impress your neighbors. Being rich means owning assets that quietly pay you. Fourth, mind your own business. Keep your profession if you need it, but never stop building something of your own on the side. Fifth, the biggest obstacles are internal, fear, cynicism, laziness, bad habits, and arrogance, and mastering yourself is the real work. Sixth, work to learn, not just to earn, and treat your whole life as an education. And seventh, and above all, take action, because a brilliant idea you never act on is worth exactly the same as no idea at all. In the end, Rich Dad, Poor Dad is not really a book about money. It is a book about how we think and about the invisible scripts we inherit from our parents, our schools, and our culture, scripts that quietly shape whether we spend our lives working for money or arranging for money to work for us. Robert Kiyosaki's great gift, whatever his flaws as a guide, is that he makes the invisible visible. He takes assumptions that most of us never even notice we are carrying, the assumption that a house is an asset, that a high salary equals wealth, that the safe path is always the smart path, and he holds them up to the light and asks, "Are you sure?" And that question, asked honestly, can change the entire direction of a life. You do not have to agree with every claim in this book, and I have tried to show you where you should push back and where you should be cautious. But if the book gets you to look at your own finances with fresh and curious eyes, if it moves you to learn one new thing about how money truly works and then to take one small action, then it will have done its most important job. The two dads are, in the end, two futures, and every day, in 100 small choices, you are quietly deciding which one you are walking toward. The most valuable asset you will ever own is the mind between your ears, and the best investment you will ever make is the ongoing education of that mind. So keep learning, keep thinking clearly, act with courage and with care, and let your money begin, at last, to work as hard for you as you have always worked for it.